In the world of law enforcement, the FBI's Most Wanted Fugitives list stands as an ominous register of the most elusive and dangerous criminals. Among the ranks of the wanted, a select few women have earned their place in this notorious lineup, defying expectations and norms. Who are these women, and just what did they do to earn their place on the FBI's infamous wanted list? Ruja Ignatova. In 2016, the term cryptocurrency was gaining prominence, and investors were eager to seize the opportunities it presented. In the midst of the cryptocurrency craze, one woman sought to make tremendous profits. Ruja Ignatova, referring to herself as the Crypto Queen, boasted about her company, OneCoin, positioning it as a formidable contender against Bitcoin in the burgeoning cryptocurrency market. She boldly claimed, "In 2 years, nobody will speak about Bitcoin anymore," garnering applause and approval from investors. However, just 16 months later, in October 2017, Ignatova boarded a plane in Sofia, Bulgaria, and mysteriously vanished, remaining elusive to this day. The abrupt disappearance followed allegations that OneCoin was operating as a pyramid scheme, defrauding individuals worldwide of over $4 billion. Federal prosecutors characterized OneCoin as one of the most extensive international fraud schemes ever orchestrated, resulting in Ruja Ignatova's inclusion among the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, alongside accused gang leaders and murderers. Her face became a fixture on the FBI's website and a topic of discussion in major news outlets globally. She also found herself on Europe's most wanted fugitives list. But who is this woman that deceived the world? Born in Bulgaria, Ruja Ignatova held German citizenship. Her upbringing was marked by her father's engineering profession and her mother's career as a teacher. During her childhood, her family relocated to Germany, where Ignatova excelled academically. She dedicated her free time to studying and playing chess, earning a reputation among her peers as intelligent, ambitious, and somewhat aloof. Ignatova secured a scholarship to a university in Konstanz, Germany, where she crossed paths with a fellow law student whom she eventually married. Notably, she expressed no desire to have children, believing it would hinder her pursuit of wealth. She openly aspired to become a millionaire by the age of 30. After pursuing European law studies at Oxford University, Ignatova embarked on a career as a consultant for McKinsey & Company, a renowned international management consulting firm based in Sofia. Clients respected her and admired her journey from humble beginnings to financial success. Her proficiency in multiple languages, including Russian, German, English, and Bulgarian, further enhanced her professional appeal. Appearances were paramount to Ignatova. She frequently graced events in elegant evening gowns, adorned with striking red lipstick and sparkling diamond accessories. In 2014, Ignatova, alongside her co-founder Greenwood, initiated efforts to promote OneCoin to potential investors across Europe, New York, and the world. They organized online webinars and conferences, encouraging individuals to deposit funds into accounts, facilitating the acquisition of OneCoin packages. OneCoin operated as a multi-level marketing network, with investors earning commissions for recruiting others to purchase cryptocurrency packages. Ignatova and her associates promised substantial returns on investments, sometimes as high as 5-fold or 10-fold. This pledge led to a frenzy of buying, with investors contributing more than $4 billion between the fourth quarter of 2014 and the fourth quarter of 2016 alone. Federal prosecutors uncovered an email from Ignatova to Greenwood in August 2014, stating, "We are not mining actually, but telling people shit." Cracks began to appear in the facade in 2016 when investors struggled to sell their OneCoins, leaving them unable to recover their initial investments. Online rumors of fraudulent practices started circulating, attracting the attention of media outlets and federal investigators both in the U.S. and internationally. Details surrounding Ignatova's marriage remain unclear. Still, it's known that she became aware of the investigation into OneCoin when she bugged her American boyfriend's apartment, discovering his cooperation with a federal probe targeting her company. In October 2017, the U.S. Department of Justice charged Ignatova with various counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, each carrying a maximum 20-year sentence. She also faced a charge of conspiracy to commit securities fraud, which had a maximum 5-year sentence. A federal judge in New York issued an arrest warrant for her. Less than 2 weeks later, on October 25, 2017, Ignatova boarded a commercial flight from Sofia, Bulgaria, to Athens, Greece. Subsequently, she vanished entirely, leaving her business associates to face the consequences of the company's impending downfall. Donna Jean Wilmot. Donna Jean Wilmot and her partner, Claude Daniel Marks, were at the forefront of the activities of the Weather Underground organization in 1985. The Weather Underground, originally known as the Weatherman, emerged in 1969 as a far-left Marxist militant organization founded on the Ann Arbor campus of the University of Michigan. It operated as a faction within the broader Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, national leadership. By 1970, it officially adopted the name Weather Underground Organization, WUO, and its primary political objective was to establish a revolutionary party aimed at overthrowing what they perceived as the imperialist United States government. During this period in 1970, the group issued a provocative declaration of a state of war against the U.S. government under the banner of the Weather Underground Organization. Throughout the 1970s, WUO carried out a series of bombings targeting government facilities and several banks. Notably, some of these attacks were preceded by evacuation warnings and accompanied by threats outlining the specific grievances or issues they sought to address. The Weather Underground remained underground for quite a few years, but by 1976 the organization was disintegrating. However, the Weather Underground organization reared its head again in 1985 with Donna Jean Wilmot and Claude Daniel Marks taking the lead. The duo went into hiding after their elaborate plan to detonate a maximum security prison and liberate Oscar Lopez was unveiled. Oscar Lopez was the imprisoned leader of the Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional, FALN, a group dedicated to Puerto Rican political independence. Their intricate plot was unraveled when Marks purchased a substantial 37 pounds of explosives from an undercover agent. Following this, the pair fled to Los Angeles, only to discover FBI monitoring devices surreptitiously placed in their vehicle. Realizing they were under surveillance, they made a fateful decision to vanish from the authorities' radar, and they succeeded. By May of 1987, both Wilmot and Marks had earned a place on the FBI's most wanted list. With their respective spouses and children, the two fugitive families relocated to Pittsburgh, where they settled in the unassuming neighborhood of Squirrel Hill, assuming different names and identities. Wilmot adopted the persona of Joe Elliott, while her husband, Robert McBride, went by Tim Anderson. Among their new acquaintances, they were known as dedicated parents to their daughter, Zoe. Wilmot was a valued member of the community, frequently volunteering her time with AIDS-infected children. Claude Daniel Marks, now known as Greg Peters, played the role of a devoted husband and father of two. He drew crowds to the Little League baseball games he coached and volunteered for a literacy project aimed at assisting inner-city children. Additionally, he cultivated tomatoes in his home garden, which he generously donated to a nearby residence for the mentally disabled. Like many fugitives on the FBI's most wanted list, the weight of living a double life eventually became unbearable. After a year of negotiations with the authorities and nearly a decade on the run, both Wilmot and Marks made the courageous decision to surrender to FBI agents in Chicago in 1994. Upon their arrest, the two fugitives made a statement, revealing, "First challenge to activism by the movements of the 60s, both of us have spent all our adult lives working to change the injustices that are a part of the very fabric of society." In the legal aftermath of their actions, Wilmot was sentenced to 5 years, while Marks received a more substantial sentence of 10 years due to his greater involvement in the bombing and escape plot. Their story serves as a complex chapter in the history of political activism and its consequences. Angela Yvonne Davis. Angela Yvonne Davis, born on January 26, 1944, is a prominent American political activist, philosopher, author, and academic with affiliations at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Throughout her life, Davis has been associated with various political and social movements, notably being a member of the Communist Party USA, CPUSA, and a founding figure of the Committees of Correspondence for Democracy and Socialism, CCDS. Her activism also extended to involvement in contemporary movements like Occupy and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. One of the key episodes in Davis's life involves her support for the Soledad brothers, a group of 3 inmates accused of killing a prison guard at Soledad Prison. This support marked a pivotal moment in her life's trajectory. On August 7, 1970, a dramatic incident unfolded when 17-year-old African-American high school student Jonathan Jackson took control of a courtroom in Marin County, California. His brother, George Jackson, was one of the Soledad brothers. Jonathan Jackson armed the black defendants and took several people, including Judge Harold Haley, the prosecutor, and 3 female jurors, hostage. As Jackson left the courthouse with the hostages and the 2 black defendants, James McLean, one of the defendants, fired at the police, initiating a chaotic exchange of gunfire. Tragically, the judge and the 3 black men lost their lives during this melee, while 1 juror and the prosecutor sustained injuries. The judge's injuries were particularly severe, as he was shot in the head with a shotgun blast and also suffered a chest wound from a possible external bullet. The evidence during the subsequent trial suggested either injury could have been fatal. In a startling revelation, it came to light that Angela Davis had purchased several of the firearms used by Jackson in the attack, including the shotgun responsible for shooting Judge Haley. Davis had acquired this weapon just 2 days before the incident from a San Francisco pawn shop. Additionally, her correspondence with one of the inmates involved in the event was also uncovered. Under California law, anyone involved in a crime, whether directly committing the act or aiding and abetting its commission, could be considered a principal in that crime. Thus, Angela Davis faced grave charges of aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder in the death of Judge Harold Haley, leading to a warrant for her arrest issued by Marin County Superior Court Judge Peter Allen Smith. In response, a massive manhunt to locate and apprehend Davis was initiated. Her life turned into a fugitive's existence as she sought refuge in the homes of friends, moving under the cover of night. On October 13, 1970, FBI agents discovered her presence at a Howard Johnson Motor Lodge in New York City, leading to her arrest. President Richard M. Nixon commended the FBI for capturing what he termed the dangerous terrorist Angela Davis. However, during her subsequent trial, which concluded on June 4, 1972, a jury composed entirely of white individuals deliberated for 13 hours before delivering a verdict of not guilty. They determined that mere ownership of the firearms used in the crime was insufficient to establish her direct involvement in the conspiracy. Davis was skillfully represented by legal experts who employed innovative strategies, such as hiring psychologists to help identify sympathetic jurors, an approach that has since become more commonplace in legal practice. Shauntay L. Henderson. Born on October 18, 1982, Shauntay L. Henderson is an American individual whose life has been marked by a series of legal troubles and encounters with the criminal justice system. Her story is one of a tumultuous journey through the legal system, including a brief period of notoriety as a fugitive. Henderson's early years were spent in the challenging environment of the Charlie Parker Square public housing project in Kansas City, Missouri. This background would set the stage for the events that would unfold in her life. The most notorious incident involving Henderson occurred on September 2, 2006, when she was implicated in the fatal shooting of one DeAndre Parker at a gas station in Kansas City, Missouri. In her defense, Henderson claimed that Parker had attempted to run her over with his truck, leading to her use of lethal force. The legal proceedings that followed this tragic event were complex and fraught with controversy. Initially, Henderson faced murder charges related to Parker's death. However, during her trial, a judge ultimately acquitted her of these charges, but found her guilty of the lesser offense of voluntary manslaughter and armed criminal action. This verdict reflected the complexities of the case, as it acknowledged her use of force while also recognizing mitigating circumstances. Nevertheless, Henderson's legal battles did not end there. It's important to note that Henderson's legal entanglements extended beyond the initial manslaughter conviction. Police had suspected her involvement in additional murders and shootings, although no further charges were filed in relation to these allegations. Henderson's association with a purported gang, the 512 inches or 5-ace deuce, had drawn the attention of law enforcement. However, at her trial, she vehemently denied any connections to criminal organizations. Before her trial, however, she found herself on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list for her involvement in the shooting case. The seriousness of her situation was evident, as there was a substantial reward of $100,000 for information leading to her capture. In a twist of fate, the FBI succeeded in locating and apprehending her on March 31, 2007. By the time she was captured, she hadn't been on the top 10 most wanted fugitives list for 24 hours. Her rapid capture marked the end of her fugitive status. The legal journey continued for Henderson as she underwent a bench trial. During the trial, she notably served as her own main witness and asserted a self-defense claim. Ultimately, the judge rendered a decision that included parole and a 10-year suspended sentence. However, only 5 months into her parole, Henderson's legal troubles resurfaced. She was pulled over and subsequently found in possession of narcotics and an illegal firearm. This discovery led to a significant turn of events. In addition to receiving a 10-year prison sentence for manslaughter, she was slammed with a 7-year federal sentence for the illegal possession of a firearm, to which she she had pleaded guilty on October 27, 2011. As a result, her total incarceration period amounted to 17 years. After her time in federal prison, Henderson was transferred to the Women's Eastern Reception Diagnostic and Correctional Center in Vandalia, Missouri, marking yet another chapter in her complex and troubled legal history. Brenda Delgado. Brenda Delgado's life story is a tale of ambition, love, obsession, and a descent into a world of crime and violence. Born to immigrant parents, Luis and Maria Delgado in Dallas, Texas, Brenda faced the challenges of a financially unstable childhood with determination and a drive for success. She was an exceptional student in school and took on multiple part-time jobs to support herself. After graduating in 2000, Brenda pursued a career as a dental assistant, a field she had a passion for. Her hard work paid off, and she made significant progress in her professional life. However, her life took an unexpected turn in 2012 when she met Ricky, a man who would become a significant part of her life. The connection between Brenda and Ricky was instant, and she moved in with him after her roommate asked her to vacate their apartment. Their relationship appeared strong and stable, with only one brief breakup during this period. During their time together, Brenda became pregnant, but she made the difficult decision to have an abortion. Her identity seemed to revolve around her relationship with Ricky, and she would often obsessively talk about him, according to friends and acquaintances. Despite the breakup, Brenda and Ricky maintained a platonic friendship and frequently crossed paths. It was later revealed that Brenda had gained unauthorized access to Ricky's email and iCloud accounts, using them to stalk him. This behavior made her multiple encounters with Ricky and his new girlfriend, Kendra Hatcher, more unsettling and invasive. It was no longer a coincidence that she ran into him often. Her obsession with Ricky's new relationship with Kendra intensified over time, leading to alarming consequences. According to her former roommate, Jennifer Escobar, she was mad all the time. I kind of understood her anger, but at the same time she was super obsessed with him. She just wanted to eliminate Kendra Hatcher, or both of them. In September 2015, Brenda made a chilling decision. She hired individuals named Christopher Love and Crystal Cortez to carry out a heinous act, murdering Kendra Hatcher. The crime occurred in the parking garage of Gables Park 17, the luxury apartment complex where Kendra lived. Christopher Love shot Kendra, while Crystal Cortez served as the getaway driver, using a black Jeep that Brenda had borrowed from a friend. Brenda's intention was to make the murder appear as a botched robbery. Authorities initially brought Brenda in for questioning, but she attempted to divert suspicion by claiming she had lent the borrowed Jeep to Cortez. As a result, investigators turned their attention to Crystal Cortez, who eventually confessed to her involvement in the murder in exchange for a 35-year prison sentence. Christopher Love was also arrested and subsequently sentenced to death. In the wake of her hired guns arrests, Brenda Delgado fled to Mexico to evade capture. Since she was a Mexican citizen as well, she was only extradited to the United States after receiving assurances that she would not face the death penalty. In a court of law, Brenda was convicted of capital murder and subsequently sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As of today, Brenda Delgado remains incarcerated, serving her sentence for her role in orchestrating the murder of Kendra Hatcher. Her life, once filled with promise and ambition, serves as a cautionary tale of the dark and destructive consequences of obsession and criminal intent. Shena S. Miner. Shena Miner's tragic story unfolded on March 6, 2016, in a horrifying act that left a community devastated. She was just 25 years old when she fatally shot Tameka Perry, a pregnant mother, leading to the heartbreaking death of Perry's unborn child. After 4 months on the run, Miner eventually faced the consequences of her actions. On Wednesday, July 26th of that same year, Miner made a solemn admission of guilt in court. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of first-degree reckless homicide and 1 count of first-degree reckless homicide of an unborn child. These charges reflected the gravity of her actions on that fateful day. The incident began when Miner came to Perry's home to address an ongoing dispute. It was revealed that Miner and Perry had argued about loud music playing a week before the tragic shooting. According to the criminal complaint, tensions had escalated as Miner believed Perry had disrespected her. On that ill-fated morning, shortly before 3 a.m., Miner arrived at the residence near 30th and Hour. Miner's mother was also present at the scene and had attempted to intervene to de-escalate the situation. She had received a call from her daughter, informing her of her presence at the residence. However, despite her mother's efforts to persuade Miner to leave, she managed to enter the home. During the argument in a hallway, Miner's mother stood between the two women, attempting to keep them separated. At a critical moment, the complaint revealed that Miner raised a hand and pointed a gun in the direction of Perry. The gravity of the situation became apparent when Perry's boyfriend reported that Miner was carrying a black firearm with an extended clip. Tragically, Miner made a horrifying decision. Over her mother's shoulder, she aimed the firearm and fired a shot, striking Perry in the chest. Perry retreated into her home, where she tragically collapsed and passed away in front of her other 2 children. The heart-wrenching aspect of this incident is that Perry's unborn child was due on March 11, 2016, mere days away from the tragedy. The loss of 2 lives that day was a painful reminder of the devastating consequences of violence and confrontation. Following the shooting, Miner fled the scene in a vehicle, evading law enforcement for nearly 4 months. However, her evasion came to an end when she was arrested on July 1, 2016, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Her arrest took place just 3 days after she was added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives list, an unfortunate distinction that marked her as the 7th Wisconsin fugitive to ever make that list, and only the 10th woman nationally. In July, Miner entered a guilty plea to first-degree reckless homicide on both counts she faced, acknowledging the irreversible harm she had caused. The court sentenced her to 30 years in prison, along with an additional 10 years of supervision on each count. These sentences were to be served concurrently, reflecting the severity of her actions and the pain she inflicted upon the victims' families and the community as a whole. Katherine Power and Susan Edith Sachs. Katherine Power, also known by the aliases May Kelly and Alice Louise Metzinger, has a remarkable and complex story. Born on January 25, 1949, she became an American ex-convict and a fugitive, eventually landing on the FBI's most wanted fugitives list in 1970. Her involvement in a series of crimes, including robberies and a tragic shooting, led her on a decades-long journey, eluding capture for over 20 years. Power's early life unfolded in Denver, Colorado, where she was the 3rd of 7 children in a middle-class Irish Catholic family. Her parents, Winfield and Marjorie, provided for their family through Winfield's role as a bank credit manager and Marjorie's work as a registered nurse. Despite their modest means, Katherine excelled in her youth. She was active in the Girl Scouts, earned a scholarship to Marycrest Girls High School, graduated as valedictorian, and secured a full scholarship to attend Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts. In 1967, Power began her studies at Brandeis, majoring in sociology during a time when student protests against the Vietnam War were sweeping the campus. Known for her unconventional attire, activism, and participation in Students for a Democratic Society rally, Power became deeply involved in various student protests. She also joined forces with her roommate, Susan Edith Sachs, in organizing student demonstrations. Their association with a fellow student, Stanley Ray Bond, led Power and Sachs into a plot to arm the Black Panther Party in response to the Vietnam War. Bond introduced them to former convicts William Gilday and Robert Valeri, and together they hatched a plan to rob the State Street Bank and Trust. In September 1970, the group executed a robbery at a National Guard armory in Newburyport, Massachusetts, resulting in stolen weapons and significant damage. Just 3 days later, on September 23, 1970, they carried out another armed robbery at a bank in Brighton. Tragically, during this robbery, Boston police officer Walter Schroeder was shot and killed by Gilday while attempting to intervene. With Power behind the wheel of one of the getaway vehicles, the group fled the scene with stolen cash, intending to use it to fund their plan to overthrow the federal government. Evidence discovered at Power's apartment following the bank robbery linked her to both crimes. This evidence included weapons, ammunition, and a telephone switchboard from the armory. Power's legal defense later claimed that her involvement resulted from manipulation by Bond. While Gilday, Valerie, and Bond were captured soon after the Brighton robbery, Bond died in custody while attempting to build a bomb to facilitate his escape. Valerie cooperated with authorities and testified against Gilday, receiving a 25-year prison sentence. Gilday, however, was sentenced to death. Power and Sachs managed to evade capture, and by November 1970, they had become the 16th and 17th individuals on the FBI's most wanted fugitives list. Initially, Power and Sachs traveled together, seeking refuge in women's communes. During this time, they made their way to Connecticut, where Power assumed the alias May Kelly. Sachs, however, remained on the run until 1975, when she was finally apprehended in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and subsequently served a 5-year prison sentence. Power's whereabouts remained a mystery until 1974, when she was last seen in Kentucky. In 1977, she adopted the identity of Alice Louise Metzinger by using the birth certificate of a deceased infant. In 1979, she moved to Oregon, giving birth to her son Jamie with an undisclosed father. Over time, authorities received few leads on Power's location, leading to her removal from the most wanted fugitives list in 1984. Subsequently, she settled in Lebanon, Oregon, with her son Jamie and her boyfriend Ron Duncan, living a life under her assumed identity. Throughout her life, Power grappled with clinical depression, which she had experienced since childhood. She confided her fugitive status to her therapist. Power yearned to reclaim her true identity, and through therapy, gradually prepared herself for surrendering to the authorities. This included her decision to marry Ron Duncan in 1992 and reveal her past to her friends. In 1993, Katherine Power negotiated her surrender with law enforcement, marking the end of her 23-year-long fugitive journey. Bernardine Ray Dohrn. Bernardine Ray Dohrn, born on January 12, 1942, is a retired American law professor who once played a prominent role in the far-left militant organization known as the Weather Underground in the United States. During the early 1970s, Dohrn held a spot on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, remaining a fugitive for several years before being removed from the list. Born as Bernardine Ornstein in Chicago, Illinois, in 1942, she spent much of her childhood in Whitefish Bay, an upper-middle-class suburb of Milwaukee. It was during her high school years that her father, Bernard D. Ornstein, changed the family name to Dohrn. Dohrn was active in various school activities, including cheerleading, and graduated from Whitefish Bay High School with honors. She began her higher education journey at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, before transferring to the University of Chicago, where she earned an honors BA in political science in 1963. Later, in 1967, she obtained her JD from the University of Chicago Law School. During her time at law school, Dohrn became involved in supporting civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. and became the first law student organizer for the National Lawyers Guild. In the late 1960s, Dohrn emerged as a leader in the Revolutionary Youth Movement, RYM, a radical faction of Students for a Democratic Society, SDS. In 1969, alongside 10 other RYM-affiliated SDS members, she co-authored a manifesto titled, "You Don't Need a Weatherman to Know Which Way the Wind Blows." This document declared a revolutionary goal to dismantle U.S. imperialism and establish a classless world under communism. Dohrn played a key role in the Weather Underground's transformation from a group focused on political advocacy to one engaged in violent actions. In May 1970, she was a prominent signatory on the declaration of a state of war, effectively declaring war on the U.S. government. She co-authored the subversive manifesto Prairie Fire in 1974 with Bill Ayers, another Weather Underground member. She also participated in the covertly filmed documentary Underground in 1976, reaffirming her support for communist ideology in a 1975 article titled Our Class Struggle. Controversy surrounded Dohrn due to her comments about the Manson clan murders. During a 1969 speech at the Weatherman's War Council, she made disturbing remarks regarding the murders of actress Sharon Tate and retail store owners Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. On October 14, 1970, Dohrn was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list due to the escalating activities of the Weather Underground. Her removal from the list came in December 1973 when District Court Judge Damon Keith dismissed the case against the Weathermen. During her time on the run, Dohrn assumed numerous aliases and married Bill Ayers, another Weatherman leader with whom she has 2 children. They resided in Chicago using various assumed identities, ultimately settling as Christine Louise Douglas and Anthony J. Lee. In the late 1970s, the Weatherman group splintered into 2 factions, the May 19th Coalition and the Prairie Fire Collective. Dohrn and Ayers aligned with the latter, advocating for surrender and facing the charges against them. A pivotal factor in Dohrn's decision to surface was her concern for her children. In 1980, the couple turned themselves in to authorities. Although some charges related to their Weatherman activities were dropped due to prosecutorial misconduct, Dohrn pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges of aggravated battery and bail jumping, resulting in probation. She also served a 7-month prison sentence for contempt of a grand jury after refusing to testify against ex-Weatherman Susan Rosenberg in an armed robbery case. Shortly after their surrender, Dohrn and Ayers became legal guardians of Chesa Boudin, who eventually went on to become the 29th District Attorney of San Francisco. Ruth Eisemann-Schier. In a chilling episode that sent shockwaves through the nation, Ruth Eisemann-Schier etched her name into infamy as the first woman to ever grace the FBI's Most Wanted list in December 1968. Her notoriety was born from a sinister act of kidnapping that unfolded in Atlanta on December 17th of that fateful year. Eisemann-Schier, in league with her accomplice Gary Stephen Christ, perpetrated the audacious abduction of Barbara Jean Mackle, a young Emory University student. Mackle was the daughter of a prominent Florida land developer developer whose connections reached even to President-elect Richard Nixon. Their brazen act began with the cold precision of a thriller script. Brandishing firearms, they seized Barbara at gunpoint, using chloroform to subdue her and injecting a potent sedative. Their plan was as audacious as it was macabre. They transported their captive to Berkeley Lake, some 30 miles north of Atlanta, and there they buried her in a makeshift coffin beneath 2 feet of earth. Yet the horror was far from over. To keep their victim alive, they ingeniously rigged an air pump, provided sustenance, and offered water laced with sedatives. A battery-powered lamp inside the box illuminated Barbara's nightmarish confinement as they waited for her father to pay a colossal $500,000 ransom. The clock ticked relentlessly as Robert Mackle, anguished and desperate, complied with the kidnappers' demands. But the directions they provided were vague at best. Law enforcement officers combed the area, digging with their bare hands, driven by a singular goal to rescue Barbara Jean from her harrowing ordeal. Miraculously, they succeeded, locating her alive after 83 agonizing hours of captivity. While Eisemann-Schier's partner in crime, Gary Stephen Christ, met a swift end to his freedom within 24 hours of Barbara's rescue, captured off the coast of South Florida on a speedboat he had purchased with the ill-gotten ransom money, Eisemann-Schier managed to elude authorities with slightly more success. Her audacious exploits landed her on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list on December 28, 1968, marking an unprecedented milestone as the first woman to attain that dubious distinction. However, her days as a fugitive were numbered. On March 5, 1969, just 2 months after being indicted for the harrowing kidnapping, Eisemann-Schier's pursuit of a nursing job proved to be her undoing. Her fingerprints raised alarm bells, leading to her capture. She had been residing in Oklahoma under the alias Donna Sue Wills. Subsequently, she pleaded guilty to the charges against her and commenced serving her 7-year prison sentence, of which she completed 3 years. Upon release, she was deported to her homeland, Honduras, effectively closing one chapter of her dark tale. As for her partner in crime, Gary Stephen Christ, he eventually found his way back into society. After serving 10 years behind bars, he pursued a medical degree and became a practicing physician in West Virginia. However, his return to normalcy was tainted by allegations of misconduct, specifically for crossing sexual boundaries with patients. Despite these disturbing claims, Christ was allowed to continue practicing medicine in Indiana, leaving behind a trail of controversy and unanswered questions. Marie Dean Arrington. In 1969, Marie Dean Arrington made history by becoming the second woman ever to be included in the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list. Arrington's legal troubles began in 1964 when she was convicted of killing her husband, Lester Jack Arrington. At the time, Jack was a former police officer and a bouncer at a Miami nightclub. On July 4, 1964, he met his tragic end on Bethune Beach. The day after the incident, Arrington turned herself in, admitting to the shooting. During her trial, Arrington asserted that the shooting had been accidental, while her lawyer argued it was an act of self-defense, claiming that Jack had turned violent during a heated argument in their car, leading to her taking the extreme step of shooting him. A witness corroborated this account, stating that he had intervened when he saw Jack choking Arrington in their car. Because the murder weapon could not be located, Arrington was convicted of manslaughter rather than more serious charges and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. In a 2012 interview, Arrington confessed to burying the gun along with her husband. During this period, Arrington had 2 children, a son and a daughter. In 1967, her son, Lloyd Dean, and a friend robbed a gas station in Leesburg, Florida. Fortunately, no one was injured, and they made away with $60. However, Dean received a life sentence in 1968 at the age of 18, while his accomplice received probation. Their public attorney, Bob Pierce, who also represented Arrington's daughter in an unrelated fraud case that resulted in her imprisonment, advised Dean to plead guilty. Arrington was infuriated by what she saw as Pierce's inadequate representation of her son. On April 22, 1968, while out on an appeal bond for her manslaughter conviction, Arrington went to Pierce's office in Leesburg with the intent of killing him. However, she discovered that Pierce was not present. Instead, Arrington abducted his secretary, Vivian Ritter, a grim event that heightened tensions in the town. A search for Ritter ensued, and even a psychic was consulted to assist in locating the missing secretary. 2 days after her disappearance, Ritter's car was found, stained with blood. Her body was discovered 3 days later in the woods near State Road 44, several miles away from Leesburg. She had been shot and repeatedly run over with her own car. Before her eventual capture, Arrington also burglarized the home of Judge Troy Hall, the same judge who had sentenced her son to life in prison. When authorities apprehended her, they found several threatening notes in her room and clothing. These notes contained threats to harm Judge Hall's wife and mutilate Ritter unless law enforcement released her children from jail. During her trial, multiple witnesses testified against Arrington, linking her to the crime. A taxi driver reported dropping her off near Pierce's office on the morning of April 22nd. Arrington's landlady revealed that she had lent her a .22 caliber gun that was never returned and was later determined to be the weapon used to kill Ritter. On December 6, 1968, Arrington was sentenced to death for first-degree murder. However, on March 1, 1969, Arrington managed to escape from the Florida Correctional Institution, fleeing in her pajamas after cutting a window screen. In May 1969, she was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, becoming only the second woman to receive this dubious honor. Her capture did not occur until March 1972, 3 years later when she was found working as a waitress in New Orleans. Reflecting on the experience of being a wanted fugitive, Arrington compared it to the stories of the Wild Wild West and the Jesse James Gang. She found amusement in reading newspaper articles about her status as wanted, dead, or alive, and the accompanying reward offered. As a consequence of her escape, Arrington received an additional 10-year sentence. However, in August 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that capital punishment was unconstitutional, leading to her death sentence being commuted to life in prison. Marie Dean Arrington passed away at the age of 80 on May 10, 2014, due to heart problems. If you enjoyed this video, click on the card on your screen for more content like this. See you next time.